Geraldine, please.
Okay. Today is my father's yahrzeit, and my brother has a study group on Thursday afternoons, which he spoke about the traditions of observing yahrzeit by reciting Kaddish, which I won't go into unless I can forward it to anybody who's interested. But this is what I'd like to tell you about my father. This is the 50th yahrzeit for my father, Charles Margulies, Pesachia ben Mendel, Besora. He was born February 24th, 1908, and died August 15th, 1970. And he has a picture of him from his medical school yearbook from Bellevue in 1933. And it has his name and address, and that he got his undergraduate degree at Columbia Phi Beta Kappa. And it says, and the blurb that they wrote about him is, there's a picture of him. We shall remember you long, Margulies. We shall remember you and the pictures you made, slowly chanting the history, endlessly pursuing the tale, ever repeating the story. Won't your voice ever fail? And that's what they wrote about him. All right. And also, he was very young to have graduated from medical school in 1933, and he was born in 1908. So,
do you have a sense? I'm not clear. What are they referring to when they say that he keeps on telling the tale? He was
a real historian.
So that they encountered that while he was in medical school as well. All right, very good. Great.
It sounds like the way you used to start the kosher stories.
Story, right? All we have is the stories. That's
right.
What we have. That's what we have. So yes. So thank you, Geraldine. And we're going to dedicate this evening's learning to your father's memory. May he be.
Say his name again?
Yes.
His name is Pesachia ben Mendel Besora.
Pesachia ben Mendel Besora, Harofei, right? The doctor, the physician, the healer.
The healer. And I told Rabbi before, he delivered a baby just before he died that night.
Right.
On a Friday night.
And you know what? The name Pesachia is it's Pesachia, right? When in Israeli pronunciation,
yeah,
it means God opens up, right? And opening up is one of the key themes of the Zohar, right? Right, Rabbi so and so patach, Rabbi so and so patach. Each sage, when they begin speaking, they open their mouths, they open their hearts, and they open up our understanding, our eyes, to the wisdom and the light. So a beautiful name and very appropriate for tonight's study of the Zohar.
Thank you.
So let's now take our prayer, please, and we begin. Master of all worlds,
highest power,
merciful parent of
compassion,
your presence, eternal one, source of strength for us, as you have been for
our ancestors.
Very
humbly acknowledge you.
What
are we?
What is our life
that
you have done
such great kindness to us?
Therefore,
we place our appeals before you, so that you may forgive and absolve us of all our faults and failings. Let our faults never become barriers between us and you. And may it be your desire to prepare our hearts to feel awe and love for you.
May you listen
to these words of ours,
and may you open
our inconquered hearts
through the mysteries of your Torah.
May this our study be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory, like sweet incense. May you
Shower down
shower
upon
down
us
upon us the light of our soul's source in all the ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparks of your holy servants, through whom you have revealed these words to the world, shine and sparkle. May their merit, their ancestors' merit,
the merit
the
of
merit of their Torah,
their
their
innocence
innocence and their holiness stand for us so as to
and
prevent
us
us from
from
stumbling
when we
when we
study.
study these words. In
Their
their
merit,
merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet singer of Israel.
Open my
Open my eyes that I may gaze into wonders of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart
be
be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the eternal who grants wisdom. It is from his mouth that knowledge and understanding issue forth.
Na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Ah na 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 na. Ah, na, na, na. Ah, na, 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 na. Ah, na, na, na. Ah, na, 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 na. Ah, na, 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 na. Ah, na, 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Okay,
Okay.
we are on page 359. And we have the identification of Jacob's two wives, Rachel and Leah, as Shechina, Shemitah for Rachel, and as Binah and Yovel, Jubilee, for Leah. And the Zohar has shown that it's no coincidence that Leah is the mother of 6 sons and a daughter. And that reflects the divine array of potencies, sfirot, that are below the unreachable tier of divinity. So these are the children of Binah, so to speak. So there's a parallelism between her children and God's own ramifications. And Rachel is the mother of 2 sons. And we already explained one is the righteous one above, and that's Yosef, and one is the righteous one below, Benjamin. And then we had the idea that, of course, he works for 7 years, and then he works for another 7 years. So the 7s are significant in the biblical story. Again, not a coincidence. But now we're up to, and the revealed and the concealed as the last lines. From here we learned that through revealed, one reaches concealed. Rachel was the revealed beloved wife, and Leah was the hidden, the concealed one. So we're up to, now you might say, if so, which is the last few lines, the last 5 lines on 359. That's where we're going to continue from. And I'm wondering whether there's anybody here who, okay, good. So there you go, Beryl. It's all yours.
Now you might say, if so, that the first years derive from Jubilee. Well, concerning Jubilee, it is written, 7 times 7 years. 7 years appear, but where are 7 times?
So the Jubilee year is the 50th year. It follows after 7 cycles of sabbatical years, of Shemitah years, which are 7-year cycles. So it goes 7 years, and then another 7 years, 7 times is 49 years. And then the 50th year is Yovel. So Jacob worked for 7 years thinking he was working for Rachel, but actually it turned out that he was, de facto, he ended up working for Leah. He found Leah to be his wife. He was tricked by Lavan. So now the Zohar says, wait a second. But if Leah is Yovel, then that's supposed to be 7 times 7, not just 7 once, 7 times 7. So where is that? How did that get corresponded to in the biblical story? Go ahead.
The answer is those 7 days on which he celebrated his wedding with Leah completed the count. For each day is called one time, as is written, 7 times a day I praise you. Each of the 7 was completed by 7 days, 7 each day, each of which is called one time. But with Rachel, it was not so, for he didn't celebrate 7 days, only the 7 years he served later.
Okay. So now we have the answer is that there is a 7 times 7, because the 7 days of the wedding celebration after the wedding, that's 7 days, and that's 7 times the 7 years that he worked. And we have a verse that says that I praise you, God, 7 times. So each day was considered an encompassing of a 7-year cycle. Again, we might kind of psychologically understand this as Jacob celebrating something that he was not looking forward to, right? So there's the biblical story says the 7 years that he worked for Rachel were in his eyes like a few days. And now the days that he's celebrating his marriage to Leah are like 7 years every day, because this is not what he bargained for, right? And what the Zohar also notices is there is no report of a 7-day wedding feast the second time around. For Rachel, there is no 7-day celebration. So look at that. So we have 7 times 7 for Leah and only 7 for Rachel. Perfect. QED. Okay.
Now you might say, if so, he should have served the years of sabbatical first and then coupled with her. However, since he committed himself to serve, it was as if he had done so.
Okay, so again, the Zohar is trying to sort of clean up a few loose ends. And coming back to its original point, if we understand Shemitah as identified with Rachel and Yovel identified with Leah, then what comes first? Shemitah comes first. 7 years of sabbatical, and then another 7, another 7, 7 times 7, and then eventually we arrive at Yovel. So shouldn't this whole story have proceeded in the proper way with Rachel coming first? The answer is, of course, we know that that's impossible, right? He couldn't have done it that way. He had to be tricked, and he had to marry Leah first, because he had to get to the concealed through the revealed. He had to not know that he was getting to Leah. However, in order to get through the 7 revealed years first, that was his commitment. He says, I undertake to work for 7 years. So that's his knowledge. That's his intent. So that's the 7 years that equals Shemitah. And then, of course, he ends up being tricked into getting into Yovel, to his great surprise. Okay, so this is the Zohar, this is Rabbi Elazar, showing how even some of the minutest details in the biblical story can be understood to reflect spiritual and divine realities. That if you actually pay attention to these little details, they end up corresponding to this grand picture that the Zohar has developed of how God interacts with the world and how the spiritual realm becomes accessible to human beings, even in these little seemingly happenstance details of the story. Okay, Rabbi Elazar is finished. What happens next?
Rabbi Abba came and kissed him, saying, Blessed is the compassionate one for enabling me to attain this verse. Of that site is written, Yud-He Vav-He desires, for the sake of his righteousness, to expand and glorify Torah.
Okay, so that verse is Hashem Chafetz L'man Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. That's the last verse in the conclusion of Uva L'Tzion. When we say that prayer, which we recite at the end of the morning, the weekday morning services before Aleinu, we recite it also toward the beginning of Mincha on Shabbat, and also at the end of Shabbat. So this is a verse that's mentioned many times. It's also mentioned in the traditional conclusion of studying a chapter of Pirkei Avot, of the essential teachings of the sages. So this is a well-known verse, and the well-known verse says that the eternal, Yud-He Vav-He, this is his great desire, right? For the sake of his righteousness, Laman Tzidko, for the sake of his righteousness, Yagdil Torah v'yadir, to make the Torah greater and more glorious and more expansive and more, ramified and so on and so forth. God wants the Torah to just grow and grow and grow for God's own sake. So we talked a little bit earlier about the connection with God in our Torah portion, where the immediate presence of God at Mount Sinai was too much for the people, and they get the Torah instead. They get the Torah as their contact point with God. So the fact that Rabbi Elazar is able to elucidate all of this wonderful Torah, this is a wonderful, wonderful fulfillment of this verse. L'man tzidko, for the sake of God's righteousness, and the sake of God's righteousness is her Shekhinah, her Torah. The Torah is identified with Shekhinah, and this is how we continue to find ways to be closer and closer to God. How does Rabbi Abba, besides making this exclamation, how does he express his joy and appreciation? He gives Rabbi Elazar a kiss. He kisses him. So kissing is a big deal in the Zohar. We've had it many times. If anybody can remember some of the times that we encountered this idea of kissing, without going into great detail, usually, who's kissing who? Anybody have a sense overall of how it usually works? Yeah, David. Wait, David. You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted. Come talk close to the mic.
It's not the mic, it's the aim.
Yeah.
It's usually a master who is impressed with the teaching of someone who's perhaps not a rabbi, but a person who is junior.
Yeah, right. Craig, what were you going to say?
The exact same thing.
Yeah, usually there's a certain hierarchical quality to the gesture where it's a kind of an expression of appreciation and approbation that's bestowed by somebody or who at least thinks themselves of having a higher rank, and giving a big yesher koach to this person who has surprised them or who has inspired them, but who was somebody who we wouldn't have guessed would be the conduit for a teaching of such wonderfulness. So they find they bump into a donkey driver, they bump into a kid, things like that, and then the person opens their mouth and says something wonderful, and then one of the companions, one of the disciples of Rashbi, comes and gives that person a kiss. So that's kind of saying, okay, you know what, you passed our seal of approval, the good housekeeping seal of approval. We give it with this kiss. Yeah, David.
Do we see this elsewhere, for instance, in the Talmud, or is it?
It's much more in the Zohar. I wouldn't say it's not in the Talmud, although I can't recall right now a specific example. But in the Zohar, it's again and again and again. I wouldn't be surprised if there are antecedents in earlier rabbinic literature. But this is a little different. This is not quite the same situation. Here, this is an intramural kiss. It's between two companions, and two companions who are not obviously hierarchically situated one above the other. On the one hand, Rabbi Elazar is Rashbi's son, right? So he has a certain special position in the set of disciples. You know, he's the heir apparent, so to speak. But Rabbi Abba is identified elsewhere as the circle's scribe. He is the one who actually is responsible most of the time for recording the various teachings of Rashbi and the community of students. So he's got this very key role that sets him apart in many ways from some of the other companions. So it's much more kind of an equals meeting, and it's just simply Rabbi Abba is just so delighted that he has heard this wonderful exposition from Rabbi Elazar, right? Wonderful. Okay. Let's go. Rabbi Elazar continued.
Rabbi Elazar continued, what has been said about Leah giving birth to 6 sons and 1 daughter is certainly so. Rachel, 2 sons, certainly so. But as to the 4 sons of the maids, how are they arrayed? These constitute the 4 joints called hinder parts, as is written, their hinder parts all inward. For there are 3 joints in the right arm, but the one in the middle is large, facing backwards, left outside. Similarly, one in the left arm, one in the right leg, one in the left leg. When all is aligned, they all turn inward, fulfilling what is written, their hinder parts all inward. All the other joints line up straight, while these protrude outside the arms, outside the legs, demonstrating that the sons of the maids, although part of the count, are not considered equal to the sons of Rachel and Leah, and therefore they protrude.
Let's get
Alternatively,
yeah, 2 more lines. Yeah.
Alternatively, by these 4, all other joints moved by these. Rabbi Abba said, each differs from the other, so all is arrayed as one.
Okay, and that's the end of this little section. So we have this question. Before we get to the complicated answer, and we have this question. Okay, we've just talked about Rachel and Leah, but let's not forget, in order to make 12 children of Israel, we needed 2 other mothers or 2 other maidservants on behalf of the mothers, right? Rachel had a maidservant and Leah had a maidservant. And each of them gave birth to 2 more sons. So we have Leah has 6, Rachel has 2, that's 8. And of course we have the daughter, she doesn't count. So that's 8. But we need 4 more, we need 12. So what happens? We have 2 from Bilhah and 2 from Zilpah. Right? If you look at the note 328.
But as to the 4 sons of the maids, Bilhah and Zilpah, the maids of Rachel and Leah, gave birth to Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. What role do these 4 sons play in this Ephratic realm?
Okay, so these 2 maidservants were then taken by Jacob to engender more sons. The first, we've had this again and again, right? We had this with Sarah. She was barren. She gives Abraham her maidservant, and she says, "Let me have children through my maidservant." Right? That was a common practice, apparently, in the ancient Near East at the time. So that the idea being that whatever the maidservant will be able to give birth to, whoever, will then be credited to her mistress, right? And therefore the mistress is no longer technically barren, right? So it's a kind of a surrogate motherhood. So that's what Sarah does. Then we have it also, not with Rebecca, but with Rachel. She's barren. Leah has children. Rachel doesn't have children. She's very frustrated. So she gives her maidservant to Jacob, and she says, look, I want to be able to give you children. Let it be through my maidservant. And then, unfortunately, as the Torah kind of describes, there's a kind of a sibling rivalry involved. Leah says, well, if she's going to give her maidservant, I'm going to give my maidservant, even though Leah was not barren. And then she has her maidservant also become a surrogate for her. And there are two more boys that are born. So theoretically, these 4 sons were supposed to be credited to the mistresses of the maidservants, right? So they should be credited to Rachel and they should be credited to Leah. However, just like we saw in the case of Sarah and Hagar, it doesn't always quite work out that way. And the maidservant is still a constant presence. And then there's a little bit of a tinge, at least, of the pedigree being switched over to the maidservant. We have this a little bit reflected in the biblical story at the beginning of the Joseph story, right? Does anybody remember? If you look at chapter 37 in Genesis, so this is the Torah portion Vayeshev. Vayeshev Yaakov beretz Migurei Aviv beretz Canaan. So Jacob lived in the land of his where his ancestors, where his forefathers lived, in the land of Canaan. Eila toldot Yaakov. And now here's the story of Jacob. Yosef ben 17 shana. Joseph was 17 years old. And he would be a shepherd along with his brothers to take care of the flocks. V'hunar et b'nei Zilpa v'et b'nei Bilha v'et b'nei Zilpa neshei aviv. And he was a youth together with the sons of Zilpa and Bilha and Zilpa, the wives of Jacob. So here Bilha and Zilpa and the children are singled out. And Joseph, who, remember, doesn't get along with his brothers, hangs out with them. So it's ambiguous, or it's complicated. What's going on with the sibling relations? What's going on in this family? Is everybody considered equal? Is everybody accepted? It's not clear. Later on, when Joseph gets thrown into the pit, there's no differentiation. It seems like all 10 brothers equally turn on him, and whatever loyalty Joseph had shown to these maidservant sons nothing happens. But there's a kind of a little bit of a question mark, and that's the question mark that the Zohar now is entertaining. How do we actually see the status of these 4 sons? They are children of Jacob, but they're not children of Rachel and Leah. And Rachel and Leah are the divine incarnations, right? Rachel is Shekhinah, Leah is Binah. Their children, therefore, have a great yichus, they have great lineage. But that's not the case with the other 4. So where are they? How do they rank? How do they fit in this spiritual set of correspondences that we've established and this is Rabbi Elazar talking, who, he did such a minute set of explanations before this. So what's his answer? He says there's an analogy I can give. He says there's a picture that I can paint for you that will explain how it is, right? So he says these constitute the 4 joints called, I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it hinder parts or hinder parts?
Hinder parts.
Hinder, right? We want. It's like a hinder, conservatism. A nicer hinder conservatism. It's pronounced like it rhymes with kinder. That was the point. So so the hindquarters, right? That's hinder is the Yiddish, right? The hinder joints, but it rhymes with kinder. But the back joints. So these back joints are 4 back joints, and they are all inward. So what is that all about? So look at 329.
Their hinder parts all involved,
All inward.
all inward, from the description of the large bronze reservoir built by Solomon in the temple, which rested on 12 bronze oxen, 3 facing outward in each direction, with their hind quarters toward the center.
Okay, so this is the basin. This is the big sink, the kior, that the priests would sanctify their hands and feet with. The water was in this basin, and then the Levites would come and take the water from the basin and wash and sanctify the hands and feet of the priests. The leftover remembrance of this is when we wash our hands, and the Levites wash the hands of the priests if they do the priestly blessing. So this is it was called the Yam Shel Shlomo, the Sea of Solomon, because it was a huge basin, and it was made out of bronze, and it was supported by these 12 oxen, so bronze oxen, and they are standing 3 abreast and facing northeast, south, and west, and their behinds, right? Like we don't say behind, I guess. Their behinds are facing inward. So that's the way that the Tanakh describes how the animals are situated. The way the Zohar understands this is that this is actually a very important placement, because this is all about tzniut. This is about modesty. It's about appropriateness. It's about that, you don't want an animal's tuchus sticking out in a holy place. Right? So the way that the sculpture was made was that you saw the awesome, faces of the animals and their horns and their strong, bodies, but you didn't see their tuchus. Their tuchus was inside, was all underneath the basin. You couldn't see it. So this is both etiquette, and for the Zohar, it's really a very important spatial message, because the hindquarters are understood to be the not such good parts of the being of the animal. I'm going to read to you for a second. Where did I put it? I'm going to read to you for a second a description that the Zohar gives of evil, right? Of the array of evil. So This is from the Zohar from Parshas Pekudei, the end of Shmot, and this is page 244b. What is the difference between them? What's the difference between the good guys and the bad guys? What's the difference between good and evil? Well, the supernal joints, so again, talking about, and we're going to get to that in a second, the idea of actually embodying an image of goodness. The supernal joints are all in the mystery of Adam, human. And since all is in the mystery of Adam, it is written all their hinder parts inward. So their Adam is, the exemplary creature, and Adam is also capable of understanding what it means to be proper and modest. As for these other joints that we have mentioned, those joints in the middle all look backward. These are in mystery of beast. And so all their hinder parts are backward. This mystery is, as we have established, human and beast you deliver, O Eternal One. One on the side of human, one on the side of animal. The first joint in it exists a color of darkness within demonic dazzle of dense fog, growing under a curse beneath a stone, lying upon it, not growing. This looms over the worthy who have merits but lack ancestral merit. The other joints pursue the wicked who have previously perverted their way, pursuing them and all those who can be recognized by a visible mark. An angel, a holy messenger from the side of Gvura, from the left, descends and puts a mark on all of those deserving punishment. Therefore, all those joints face backward. They kick those who kick their master, and all those who deserve to be kicked, except for the righteous and the pious. Okay, so this is the idea that the hindquarters are the sign of filth, the sign of evil, and they need to be reined in. Inside is good in terms of the theory of space of the Zohar. Collecting inward is good, bursting out is bad. And I've talked about this more than once, that the syndrome of evil is that it wants to break boundaries. It wants to break the limits of the law. It wants to break the container. So when there is a collecting inward, when there's a sense of pulling back, that's a sign of holiness. When there's a sense of pritzut, that means breaking forth. Pritzut is another term that means, what do you call it? People are not being sexually responsible. What's a word for that?
Promiscuous.
Promiscuous. Thank you. Right. So this is the way the Zohar lays out the idea in spatial terms. Similarly, for instance, the Zohar understands that the Holy of Holies is the most interior space, right? The further out you go, the less holy the space becomes. Enclosed cities are more holy than non-walled cities, right? So the open wilderness is the place of the demonic. One's home is, of course, sanctified with a mezuzah on the door, with everybody comporting themselves properly and creating a home, a Jewish home. That's the internal, right? But all the world out there, watch it. So now the Zohar says, let's think about the animal. The animal is combined of this frontal better part and the more beastly animal part. That's the part that if you watch out, if you get behind an animal, it'll kick you. right? It'll befoul you. So what happens in the temple is that those animal areas are subdued and brought inside. They're brought into and under the basin of water that is the source of sanctification. But the evil, the wicked ones, don't want to be brought in. They want to burst out. And here's where we get to the joints that are the joints that always face out. So there are 4 joints: the right elbow, the left elbow, the right knee, and the left knee, which face outward. And those joints are therefore identified as problematic. The other joints come in, but these joints they protrude, and when they bend, they stick out. So now these 4 joints are understood to be 4 sticky, problematic forces, and they correspond to the 4 sons who were born to the maidservants. They have to be brought in. They have to be subdued. They have to be taken and encompassed within the enclosure of the holy. If that enclosure succeeds, then they are subsumed into the holy and they're okay. If they give in their tendency to break out and to stick out, then all is good. So that's what Rabbi Elazar is saying here. They constitute those 4 joints, right? 3 joints in the right arm, but 1 in the middle is large, facing backwards, left outside. That's the elbow. So there are 2 of those, and then the same thing with the leg, right? That's the knee. When all is aligned, when everything is operating properly, right? They all turn inward. Their tendency is to push out, and that's what we do with our elbows. But if they want to play by the rules, they will come in. They will, shrink back inwards, just like those animals allowed their hindquarters to be harnessed and put inside the innermost part of the basin. So all the other joints, that's the other 2 joints in the arm, 2 joints in the other arm, that's 8 joints. That's the 8 sons of Leah and Rachel. They're automatically fine because they have the inwardness as part of their very nature. But those 4 need to be watched out, right? So therefore, because they're so problematic, they are part of the count, but not considered equal to the sons of Rachel and Leah. Therefore, they protrude. Protruding is bad form, literally, and they do that. So this is the kind of biological discrimination that is being voiced by Rabbi Elazar, and then of course grafted onto, like I said, the kind of spatial concepts that the Zohar accepts. But then we have the last 2 lines which pull back, right? The last 2 lines say, no. You can't denigrate these 4 sons, because that's what Rabbi Elazar does. Rabbi Elazar puts them in as second-class citizens. He says, all right, we're sort of included, but they're not really 100%. But now the last 2 lines, alternatively, no, by these 4, all other joints moved by these. So according to that claim, it's sort of acknowledging, yeah, they're a little different. They protrude, the other ones don't protrude. But nevertheless, What are you going to do without them? Right? You can't live without those joints. You can't move without those joints. It's a little bit of interest that the when we stand for the Amida, so not everybody does this, but there's a tradition that we stand with our feet straight as much as we can, and we don't bend our feet. We don't stand with our feet apart. We stand as if we don't have two legs. We only have one leg because the legs are put together, and until we bow, we don't. We're not casual with the way that we move our legs. We don't move them. We keep them straight. This is to imitate angels, because angels don't have these joints. Angels, according to the traditional picture, don't have them. They don't need them. Human beings need them. We are the Mahalchim, and the angels are the Omdim. In the prophet Zechariah, he has a vision where God says, if you'll really, merit by being, being righteous and following, with God's ways, this is, a vision as the beginning of the second Commonwealth is starting. Then God says, I will place you walkers among the standards, those who stand. And the traditional understanding is those who stand is the angels, and the walkers are us. We walk. So without our knees, you can't walk. So the knees are necessary for our own existence. Without our elbows, we can't move our arms and take a Torah and hold it close to us. There's a well-known story that maybe some of you have heard already, of a person who gets a tour of heaven and hell, right? And they come to let me try to set this up so I don't ruin it. Right. So they see heaven, they see hell, and hell is that everybody's sitting at a banquet table, and there's unbelievable abundance of food put out there in front of them, and they all have these spoons with long handles to be able to take the food. However, the long handles are strapped to their arms, and they extend beyond their elbow. So they can't bend their elbow. They can't bend their arm. And that's hell. Because they have the spoons to scoop up this delicious food, but they can never get it into their mouth because they can't bend their arm to put the food into their mouth. So they're tortured. It's just terrible. Sounds a little bit like The Good Place. And then the person who's getting this tour says, and how is it in heaven? And the angel says, it's exactly the same setup. Exactly the same setup. So the person says, what do you mean? If it's exactly the same setup, it's got to be hell. So does anybody remember what the punchline is? The punchline is Craig remembers. Go ahead, Craig.
They feed each other.
Right, they can't bend their elbow to put the food in their mouth, but they can stretch their hand out to the person across the table and scoop up food and then put it into the other person's mouth, and that's heaven. Right, so it's all about the joints. It's all about how you deal with the joints. In general, you need to be able to bend your knees and your elbows. Right, Seth?
I got a new hip. I guess that doesn't count.
It's part of the whole shebang.
Okay.
Right? The hip bone is connected to the knee bone. What can I tell you? So so that's the alternatively. The alternatively is, yeah, maybe they're a little bit, act in a funny way, but what are you going to do without him? Even the so-called, good joints, they need those protuberant joints. Without them, we can't get anywhere. And finally, what Rabbi Abba says is each differs from the other, so all is arrayed as one. So Rabbi Abba says, I don't even have to make an argument that somehow or other the good guys benefit from the bad guys. The good joints benefit and are nourished with the help of the bad ones. He simply says they're different, without making the value judgment, without making a label. The point is that difference by itself is what we need to create the one, right? E pluribus unum, right? So this is, actually a kind of like almost a textbook kind of example of three levels of dealing with difference in these three statements. Anybody have anything to comment, to add, whatever? No. Okie doke. So we move right along. Now we're on 361.
Yehevavhe saw that Leah was hated, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren.
Okay, so that's the verse from the Torah. And now let's see what happens.
Rabbi Elazar opened, he settles
Akeret habayit.
the barren woman in her home. As a joyous mother of children, he
Okay, so what? Before we get to the explanation, this verse is from the first chapter of Psalms. That's part of Hallel. Moshivi akeret habayit em habanim smecha. Hallelujah. Right. That's the last verse of that psalm. So this is God's, extraordinary power to take somebody who's down in the dumps, who feels, barrenness, and God can do miracles and turn a barren woman into a happy mother of many children. Okay, as happened in the biblical stories. So the word akeret habayit, the word akeret is ha'akara shel habayit, the barren one of the house. But the Zohar is going to read it differently. And the way the Zohar is going to read it is it's going to take the word akeret and use it as ikar. The word ikar means the main thing, the essence. So akeret habayit, the essence of the house. Taking the one who is the essence of the house, the central figure of the house. In modern Hebrew, a housewife is called akeret habayit. In modern Hebrew, this became a term for, the person who runs the house, the person who's the main person in the house. So it comes out of this flipping of meaning that we have here. Okay, so the Zohar, Rabbi Elazar quotes.
He settles akeret habayit, Rachel, ikera de vayita,
Ikara de Veta, right?
essence of the house, as a joyous mother of children, Leah. He settles akeret habayit sabbatical, essence of this world, by whom it is conducted, as a joyous mother of children, Jubilee, on whom depend all freedom and joy of all worlds.
One
This
more, go ahead.
is totality of all, encompassing all in holy mystery. So the verse concludes, Hallelujah.
Okay. So how do we understand his explanation of this verse? I mean, we read it. So what is he saying? He applies it to Rachel and Leah, right? The akeret habayit is Rachel. The eim habanim smecha is Leah. and they, of course, are sabbatical, Shemitah, and Yovel. And what's the relationship between them? So the way the verse reads simply is it's the same person. She has been transformed from one into the other. Right? It's the same person. She was barren or whatever, and now she is made it to be a joyful mother, with many children. But the way Rabbi Lazar reads it is there's a relationship between the two. These are two separate figures. One is Akeret Habayit, and one is Ema Banim Smecha, but the relationship is set up through a Moshivi. Right? Moshivi, by settling the Akeret Habayit, she is settled by means of the joyous mother of many children, who then flows down, and then everything gets settled in Shechina, right? And there's this harmonious relationship between the two. But, and that kind of flow, that kind of holistic flow, hallelujah, this is the mystery of all. This is the totality of all, right? The holy mystery of the union of everything together. Of course, he's talking about a union, he's talking about a harmony. The verse that we have in front of us is about people being unhappy, right? And about the background is that they're actually in competition with each other. But that's not the case in the divine realm. So how does this end up playing out? How could it possibly be that Leah is hated? How could Leah be hated? So that's his problem. Okay, here we go. Back to the, yeah.
Saw that Leah was hated. Why was she hated? After all, children of a hated woman are unvirtuous, while obviously all those issuing from Leah were virtuous. So how can you say that Leah was hated? But truly, Jubilee always a concealed world, none of whose matters are revealed, so all its actions are concealed from Jacob.
Okay, so we have a number of statements here, a number of steps. We have a problematic verse. Leah is, of course, Bina, she's special. She's the mother of 7 children of Jacob. What gives with the hated? So now we start out with this idea that a hated mother creates children who are not virtuous, right? And then you have a note there that this comes from the idea of the Ben Soreru Moreh, right? The rebellious son. The rebellious son is a famous, notorious, teaching in the Torah, that there could be such a thing as a person who's so out of control that their parents give up on them, and they bring them, they bring the child as up to the authorities, and the rebellious son is killed. Right? Terrible, terrible law. It ends up, of course, becoming, very famously the subject of the rabbis saying, no, it never happened. That's not what it doesn't, it's a law just to be studied, but it never is actually put into barbarous practice. But what do we learn from it, say the sages? They say if you look at the Torah's flow, the rebellious son is spoken of right after the Torah says, if you happen to have more than one child, and one of them you love and one of them you hate, do not mistreat the hated child. Do not, treat the children unequally. You have to treat the children equally. And actually, even if the hated child is the firstborn, they have to get the double portion no matter what, even if you don't like them. So the Torah already recognizes that you might not like your kid. And then the rabbis say, well, how did that happen? How did you not like the kid? And the answer is because there's the section right before that. The section right before that is that you're in a war and you take a woman captive, and in your immediate lust, you decide that she's going to be your wife, and you have a child by that woman. But then afterwards, you decide that the passion is over, and you decide that you don't like her anymore. It's over. So the rabbi saw this as a continuing set of steps. You have this terrible abuse of your own power. You end up taking a woman and forcing her to be your wife and to have a child, even though you don't love her. Of course, that's going to create the child will be a child that you also won't love. And then the rabbi said, so what do you expect? You think that if you have a child that you don't love and the child is growing up in a house that's so completely dysfunctional, you think the kid is going to be okay? The kid will become a rebellious child. So of course they painted themselves into a corner, so they better not execute this kid, because it's not their fault. And of course they end up being able to not execute the kid. But that's their insight, that bad children come from, not from themselves being bad, but from experiencing hate, and experiencing the fact that their parents are hated. So here, the Zohar says, okay, so then let's apply that rule. Obviously, logically, it's not exactly the most airtight argument, but they say, look, we know that the children of Jacob are all virtuous. Let's forget now about what they did to Joseph. They were all tzaddikim. They were all virtuous because they're the children of Jacob. How could they not be wonderful? So if they were all wonderful and virtuous, that means that their mother couldn't have been hated. So how could they, right? What about Reuben's sin? Good. So there is no such thing as a righteous person who doesn't sin. Sinning doesn't make you not righteous. Right? That's the short answer. So we're just going to have to take this as an axiom. The Zohar, it posits an axiom that all of the children of Jacob, even the children that Jacob eventually hated and cursed, no, we're going to label them as righteous. You just have to accept that for this argument. If they're righteous, it means that their mother couldn't have been hated. That means that Leah could not have been hated. So how could the Torah say that she was hated? This is the way the Zohar formulates this question. What's the answer? But truly, Jubilee is always a concealed world, none of whose matters are revealed. So all its actions were concealed from Jacob. So let's look at 339.
But truly, all its actions were concealed from Jacob. Binah, symbolized by Leah, is a concealed realm. Leah was not actually hated by Jacob, but rather offensively strange to him, as suggested by Jacob's startled reaction the morning after he slept with her. In the morning, here, she was Leah.
Right. So what's the Zohar's answer? How would we put that in our own words? Yeah, Craig.
He didn't so much hate her. She was misunderstood. He didn't understand her.
Right. In other words, she wasn't loved by him. We think the opposite of love is hate, but it's not necessarily the real hate. It's just not really loving. He loved, he felt so close to Rachel. He felt enamored by Rachel. He felt passionately connected to Rachel. He wanted Rachel. He didn't hate Leah. But when you say that, she's beloved, well, then she's the opposite of beloved. So the word hated could be used that way. The 1 second, Jen. So to take it a step further, he didn't get her, right? He didn't appreciate who she was. So you could even say that he was turned off by her or hated her because he didn't understand who she was, because she's concealed. She is Bina. She's beyond him. She's beyond his ken. So you could take it that step further, right? One step further than that is, yeah, he actually did hate her. And we don't understand. That's part of the concealed. Part of the concealed is, yeah, we make these general, cliche statements about how things work out, in certain situations, but sometimes we don't understand how it works out. And nevertheless, she as Bina is untouched by our, incomprehension. Yeah, Jen.
It's a slight tangent, I'm sorry. When God says, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated, can we see that as the same kind of thing? Not with the Zohar connection, but
No.
with,
So we
I
could
I
think about-
adore Jacob, but Esau just doesn't quite make that same grade. It's not like the same as God. hating
or
Esau.
he just doesn't participate in that particular adoration. Right? We don't even have to say that it's, you could call this apologetics on my part, but all God is saying at that point is the love affair that I have with Jacob, Esau doesn't have any part of.
Right.
So then the word is hated is used in that kind of sense of the opposite, right? The other side. In general, you can love somebody deeply, 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 passionately, endlessly. That doesn't mean you hate the rest of the world. Right? They're just absolutely irrelevant to your love.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. We're going to stop here, and hopefully we'll be able to continue next time.
Yashkoach.
Koch, Reb.
Did it the wrong way. Here it is.